Mr. Pern, if you could identify yourself and who you represent, you have 10 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
Thank you, and good evening, Your Worship, members of Council. My name is James Pernew. I'm a senior planner with McElhinney Consulting Services Limited. McElhinney is a multidisciplinary consulting firm with offices all across Western Canada, including here in Saskatchewan. My home office is located at 13450 102 Avenue, Surrey, British Columbia. I'm here this evening representing the proponent of the proposed development of a highway commercial site at 4501 Armour Road. I also want to acknowledge the project architects at Dialogue who have prepared the design for this project. As I mentioned earlier, we're proposing to rezone and develop a highway commercial site at 4501 Armour Road. Our site is located directly north of another commercial site that was recently rezoned and now has started phase 1 construction. Our site plan has been designed to tie into the planned and approved development to the south. To that end, we are proposing to coordinate servicing and vehicular accesses to facilitate interconnectivity amongst all the commercial sites along Armour Road. I believe this will help reduce the traffic and the servicing infrastructure pressures on Armour Road by internalizing these elements. This is a fairly significant project with about 10,000 square meters or 40,000 square feet of commercial space on a proposed 4-acre site. This includes a 5-story, 100-room hotel that we have located prominently on the eastern portion of our site. As well, I want to point out that the proponents and developers have received a significant amount of interest from potential lessees, including for the hotel site. So the developers are anxious to begin construction as soon as they can in the new year. The architects at Dialogue have come up with a design that is contemporary and bold, utilizing clean design lines. This site represents what I believe is the city's northern gateway along Highway 11. In order to capitalize on this opportunity that the site presents, we've decided to situate the hotel, which is the largest building, on the easterly portion of the site. Particular attention was paid to the hotel building design, and as a result, you will see that the design features the extensive use of glazing, facade articulation with bold contemporary colors, and roof forms. Another site planning strategy that we utilized was to break up the placement of the buildings and the landscaping areas in order to de-emphasize the number of parking stalls that are required for a site of this scale. In closing, I'd like to say that I believe that we have a great project, one with a sophisticated design that will act as a prominent and attractive new gateway to the city. As well, this project is important to my clients, and they're very eager to commence construction in 2014. With that, I would like to thank you again for your time, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you may have regarding this project.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there questions of the delegation? Councillor O'Donnell?
Thanks very much. Evening, Mr. Pernew. I want to just compliment you first. I like the way you've laid this out so that text and picture go hand in hand. This is very nice. I've not seen this before, so well done. I just want to ask one question, actually. So while you have a subject site that we are going to deal with tonight, I'm curious a little bit about a comment that you may give us for future development and the Phase 1 site, if you don't mind how that works together.
Through the chair to Councillor O'Donnell, it's a great question. Our site is located north of a site that's currently under construction, and I made comment to the fact that we were looking at creating an internalized road system through rights-of-ways or reciprocal agreements to take traffic off of Armour Road. As well, there'll be servicing located internally on the sites as well, so that there'll be less infrastructure pressure on Armour Road. We're expecting to have to make improvements to Armour Road on our frontage as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Flegel?
Thanks, James, and welcome back. Just looking at where it says subject site and then south to obviously the new development. Are you in negotiations, or is anything going to go in? What's going to happen with the land between that would impact your development here tonight?
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Flegel. Another great question. At this time, I know that the first phase of the development site to the south is underway. They're under construction right now. The future phases would be the gap of land between the subject site and the portion of the site that's under construction. We've had some discussions through staff and with the project engineer for the site to the south, and in fact, we have a meeting scheduled for next week to talk to the owners of the land and the project engineer to resolve the servicing corridor where it's going to be precisely located. Obviously, we need to locate the roads and the servicing that match up with the internal site plan that they've got.
Thank you. Thanks for that. And through you, Mr. Mayor. Just this internal road you're talking about, if it's shut by the middle landowner, then what's the potential, or what's next, I guess, would be?
Through the chair to Councillor Flegel again, the internal road system would act as a secondary route to allow internalized traffic to move freely between the sites. There would still be access to Armour Road as a primary legal frontage, if you will, so that there would always be two accesses. There's also a site further to the north, which is also designated highway commercial, as I understand, which will also gain from this coordinated access secondary route that would be internalized. The whole idea is to try to concentrate more traffic within the sites as opposed to have them travel on Armour Road if they're doing business in multiple commercial entities on the various sites. That takes a little bit of commercial traffic pressure off of Armour Road to allow it to be a little bit more free movement for people that are traveling north-south that aren't necessarily going to the shopping areas.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flegel. Other questions or comments of the delegation? Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery, and we'll now consider the report before us.
Thank you.
Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks, Your Worship. This is CR 13-150. It is an application for a zoning bylaw amendment, application for discretionary use for retail complex at 4501 Armour Road. You saw from the diagrams that are before you, but you also heard that there is a feature here. This is a hotel. If you recall a discussion we had at one point in time where we had to make an amendment to a different development and the word shopping center came in. So I'm introducing a new phrase to you called highway commercial. I haven't done that with you before. This is now a gateway for us coming in from Saskatoon. I believe that the building before you and the structures before you are very appropriate and very attractive. The shopping center refers to the number of bays in the commercial outlets, so that's why the term is there. You'll notice that there are 221 parking stalls as required, and we have an appealing building. Now, I'm old enough to remember when it used to be an RV park, and it used to have a Quonset there, and it was thriving. The RV left a long time ago, and there's a dirty old Quonset there right now. So this is an improvement, and you'll note that there's a large development that could follow here. So we're all in favor of this one, please.
So, Councillor O'Donnell, just so you know, there are those who've been on council a long time who know what highway commercial is.
Well,
but it's not new, though.
No,
for sure.
new to me.
Councillor Flegel?
Thanks. As in the RM discussions we had, this is a long time coming for this neighborhood because now we're seeing one hotel and possibly I'm hearing gas bar. And now this group wants to bring forward another development which is going to bring on this area to fill it up and do what we've been wanting it to do probably for the last 25 years. And I'm all in full support. I know Mr. Panu and his group are becoming very aggressive in our city, and they're looking forward to developments throughout here, throughout Somerset, different areas of the city. And I think it's just a great thing that they're coming in and spending their dollars to build a better city for us and make it better for people to come and visit, because the north end of the city to date has nothing except for 2nd Avenue North and Albert Street as the only hotel so far. And with all of the things going on at the different venues, i.e. stadium, football, hockey, Northwest Leisure Center, just generalized people traveling through, it's another way. I think the only challenging thing that'll come down the road is the access points and getting in and out and making it as convenient and easy as possible. So I know our administration will be working hard on making sure that it all happens with the Department of Highways as well. So full support. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Flegel. Other comments, questions? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you again. 13151, proposed contract zone, plan group of townhomes, 4224, 4232 Wakeling Street. The story behind this one is that there was a piece of property out in Harbor Landing, this one, that was designated for a different type of development, and that development was no longer possible. So now you have before you a rather small development of 11 dwelling units, 16 parking spaces, and we think this is appropriate based on the other types of housing that are around there that it will fit in, and we look for concurrence, please.
Questions or comments from council? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councilor O'Donnell.
Next one is 13152, application for a lane closure, portion of east-west lane adjacent to 100 Dudney Avenue and 1460 McCarra Street. Again, we've talked about lane closures before, and in terms of traffic flow and so on, we felt that this was not an impediment, but actually would close the area off for a useful gain. So this is in the Tuxedo Park area. We're looking for concurrence.
Questions on this report? No comments? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now we move to bylaws. Councillor Flagel.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Findura, that bylaws 2013-71, 72, and 73 be introduced and read a first time.
Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. As indicated by Councillor Flagel, City Council is about to consider the 3 bylaws that are related to the reports that have just been passed. The required advertising has taken place. If there is anyone in the audience who would like to address City Council, I would invite you to come forward at this time. There is no one, Your Worship.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So we'll call the vote on the motion, first reading. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Flagel.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Hawkins, that bylaw 2013-71, 72, and 73 be read a second time.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Burnett, that Council hereby consent to bylaws 2013, 71, 72, and 73 go to a third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Young, that bylaw 2013-71, 72, and 73 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Councillor Flagel. I'll move on to delegations and related reports. D13-134, Chad Novak. Good evening, Mr. Novak. You know the rules. 10 minutes for your presentation. Introduce who you are, who you represent, and there may be questions of members of council afterwards.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, members of City Council and City Administration. My name is Chad Novak, and I am here today, once again, representing the Saskatchewan Taxpayers Advocacy Group, a truly grassroots group of individuals from Saskatchewan that are pushing for accountability and transparency from their municipal governments. I am here to address the recommendation before you today to authorize your Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Brent Schoberg, to negotiate external financing to a maximum of $100 million for the RRI Stadium project. I also want to make it very clear that you are not voting on any other portion of the RRI today, solely that of the stadium portion. And as such, I would respectfully ask that you consider the stadium on its own merits today. I would first like to say that, once again, I feel very strongly that this project should be immediately stopped, pending an independent, unbiased vote of the taxpaying population. I feel that this is necessary in order to properly gauge the proportion of citizens of Regina, and Saskatchewan for that matter, that indeed have an interest in seeing the stadium project proceed as proposed. Now, I would refer you to the recent wastewater treatment plant referendum results, where a whopping 43% of Regina citizens did not in fact support what was a unanimous City Council decision. This is certainly contradictory to the sentiments of City Councillors that the citizens of Regina are generally in favor of financial decisions that you are entrusted with. At the very least, they deserve to have a fair, unbiased, neutral referendum hosted by the City of Regina. Failing that, we should have a province-wide referendum, seeing as how there is a significant investment being made by the residents of all of Saskatchewan for this purely Regina-based project. Now, we continue to hear from City Council and senior city administration about their serious concerns for our major infrastructure deficit. Now, when we talk major, we're talking in excess of $2 billion with a B. This is certainly not chump change and something that I think that we should all be taking far more seriously. Now, in preparation for today's meeting, I have reviewed some of the campaign platforms for many on our current City Council, and it seemed that a common theme was the need to tackle this infrastructure deficit head on. Now, keep in mind that I'm not so blind to acknowledge that many also campaigned on the idea of going ahead with the RRI as proposed. But I am a firm believer that given the option between the two, the citizens of Regina would certainly put infrastructure as a priority over a football stadium. Now, what I would like to see from this City Council is to finally put its money where its mouth is. Step up to the plate. Demonstrate not only to Regina citizens, but also to the provincial and federal governments that you want to get this infrastructure deficit tackled. Any and all major capital projects should be delayed until we can put a sizable bite into that deficit. Now, keep in mind that we do have viable alternatives for the stadium to prolong its useful life. But we do not, I stress, we do not have that luxury with our roads and water mains. We can't just put a Band-Aid on the water mains, but we certainly can on the stadium. Yes, I know there are complaints about parts of the stadium, but to me, complaints about our roads, sidewalks, and transit should always take a higher priority than any luxury project. Now let's consider for a minute what Regina might look like if you were to take on this $100 million of debt financing and reallocate it to our roads, our sidewalks, and our transit, to name but just a few important issues. Sure, we may not be the envy of Canada for having the latest, greatest football stadium, but we most certainly would be the envy of Canada for being one of the first to tackle their crumbling infrastructure head on, and having the smoothest roads and the newest and safest underground infrastructure in all of Canada. Now consider if we were to take the entire cost of this project and reallocate that to addressing the parking and traffic nightmare that exists in downtown core and around our hospitals. Consider if we were able to tackle these issues so much that within 4 years, we were able to not only put a freeze on property taxes, but to also offer a rebate to our taxpayers. Now, I know this might sound utopian and idealistic, but I strongly believe that if you give the taxpayers a chance to have their voice heard and offer them an alternative between the stadium and core infrastructure, these kind of utopian ideas can actually become a reality. Now, one common complaint that I hear from our elected municipal officials and senior city administration is that, quote unquote, we have limited sources of income. Well, here is the perfect opportunity to demonstrate that you are able to maximize the benefit realized from those limited sources of income. Also, why not consider alternative revenue streams, such as a land bank, to supplement what you already have coming in? How about investing pension funds locally into a rental housing cooperative, for example, which could have a threefold benefit: reasonable pension returns on investment, increasing affordable housing, and increasing the sense of community that a housing cooperative offers to its residents. Another viable source of revenue is actually diverting the $6 million per year that is currently transferred from our utility bills into the General Reserve Fund.
Mr. Novak, you have 1 minute.
Apparently as an offset for property taxes in lieu. Or how about the significant advertising revenue that the city loses out on because they allow private media corporations to not only manage the advertising on Regina Transit, but also to profit at the expense of taxpayers? I feel very strongly that it would be in the best interest of taxpayers to have an independent authority review the negotiated contracts before signing. Keep in mind that we're going into extreme debt financing. And in closing, I would like to once again suggest that the members of council seriously consider what their priorities are as elected officials. Reviewing your platforms, I am once again confident that our major infrastructure deficit is certainly a common priority. What you have to decide today is whether the stadium, a recreational facility for the enjoyment of a sporting event, is more important to your constituents than the roads we drive on every single day and the pipes that carry our drinking water to our homes. And remember, apathy should never be considered to be acquiescence. Please allow this vote voluntarily and do not force the citizens of Regina to take legal action
Thank you, Mr. Novak.
as an injunction on this project.
Your time is up. Thank you. Questions of the delegation? There are none. You can return to the gallery, Mr. Novak, and we'll
Thank you, sir.
consider the report before us. Councillor Flagel.
Thank you. I rise in support of the external financing of CR 13-153, that the Deputy City Manager and CFO be authorized to negotiate external financing, including signing any necessary documents to a maximum of $100 million to address the provincial loan financing requirements of the RRI Stadium project, as number one. Secondly, a report summarizing the financing arrangements to be negotiated to be forwarded to City Council with the bylaw once the external financing has been arranged. And I will leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Other comments on the report? Councillor Murray?
Thanks very much, Your Worship, and I'm excited about this. You know, the RRI project is so much more than just a structure, just a stadium, just a field. This is obviously a much greater impact on our community. When I say our community, I'm referring to the community that I've raised my children in. The North Central community is the area that I've called home for the past 22 years, and I've watched that community grow and develop and change over those decades. And the reality is that we reached that certain point where we need a kickstart. We need something that's going to push us beyond that. And that's what the Regina Revitalization Initiative is. Your Worship, if this was just about a football stadium, I'd hazard to say that none of us would be all that entertained by it. The fact is, this is far greater. This is revitalizing a community that needs it. This is lending a hand up. And that's exactly what happens with the RRI. The completed project is going to bring to us a completely brand new neighborhood where we're going to have hundreds of new homes, affordable homes, for people to make our community into their place that they're going to raise their children, as I've raised my children in that community. Your Worship, this is far greater than just a single-use facility. This is all part of a huge business opportunity that's going to expand upon all the options that are available before us. The fact is, you don't have to go out to the box stores areas of town. You could develop and build your new store, your new shop, your new business right in the heart of our community. What a great opportunity. I can't imagine anybody being so foolish as to think that this was not the best decision for our community. This is fantastic. And anyone who would step behind it and say that this is not something that we want to do, step in front and say we should stop this, I think is going down the wrong path. The reality is our community is on a growth agenda. We're on a development agenda. This is a great opportunity for our city, and I think it would be foolish for anyone to say that this wasn't a good idea. So, Your Worship, I would encourage all of our colleagues to support this fully. This means revitalizing a community, changing it from what it's been seen as in a somewhat negative light from time to time to what it truly is. It's a community of character homes and wide streets, mature trees, minutes from downtown, minutes from shopping and stores. We've got the Performing Arts Center right around the corner. We have a par 3 golf course right across the tracks. We've got hospitals and shops and stores and schools, all of these things, and Your Worship, reasonable property taxes. It's a pretty darn good place. And I would encourage people into the future to look to the new developments that are going to occur. And this is one step in that process to get us there. Your Worship, I am thrilled to be a part of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Other comments? Councillor Fraser?
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Just a couple quick questions for administration. Just to clarify the nature of this loan, I guess. I feel that this has sort of been presented in the media as a special part of the financing. I understand that the intent with this financing is that it will be repaid through a $12 per ticket surcharge. Is that correct?
Mr. Carlson, do you want to take that?
Your Worship, call upon Ms. Teresa Florzone to respond to that.
Ms. Florzone?
Through you, Worship, the $12 fees from the facilities from the stadium will be recovered in order to pay for the debt of the $100 million.
Okay, thank you. And I also understand that this money is it's being borrowed through the Municipal Financing Corp. Could someone just explain why we're doing that?
Ms. Florzone?
Through you, Mr. Worship, the $100 million was part of the agreement with the province that we will borrow the first $100 million through the provincial government. It was through the agreement that was signed as part of the council resolution.
And there's some cost savings thus to do that versus just to go to the market. Is that right?
Through
Ms.
you,
Florzone? Yes.
Mr. Worship, the provincial government can get rates at a AAA rating, whereas the City of Regina gets at a AA rating. So we definitely get cost savings by going through the province.
Okay. Is there any chance for us to borrow the rest of the money through this mechanism? Or do we always, if they have a better credit rating, why don't we always try to borrow through them?
Ms. Florzone?
Through you, Mr. Worship, the opportunity to go through the provincial government has been done in the past through the SIGI debt that we borrowed back in 2008. We did actually borrow through the province, so there are opportunities in the past that we have done.
Okay, so just a closing point. I think if the province is letting us borrow their credit rating to save a bit of money, that's a good thing. Although it should be clear that this is the city's loan. Like, it's the city that's liable. It's not the province that's. If this money doesn't get paid back, this is our loan. It's not the province's loan. And also, it's our debt ceiling that's had to be raised from 350 to 450. So I just think that should be clear that I guess it's a favor, I guess, of the province to let us use their credit rating. It also is in every way, shape, and form. This is the city's loan. It's not the province's loan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Other comments? I'd only add that we're not deciding about the stadium tonight, of course. That's been done and the RFP's out. We're only approving for the deputy city manager and CFO at the proper choosing in time to go to the market. That's a very narrow issue. I'm going to call the question on the report. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We have another delegation, Mr. Tony Casola. If you could come forward and identify yourself, who you represent. You have 10 minutes for your presentation, and we may have questions of you afterwards.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship and Councillors. My name is Tony Casola, and I'm with Casola Coppa Architects. I am representing our client Boardwalk Rental Communities as the architect and applicant for this discretionary use application. Boardwalk Rental Communities would be the owner and operator of the proposed development if it were to be approved by Council. We therefore thought it would be appropriate to talk a little bit about Boardwalk and what they do. Boardwalk is Canada's leading owner and operator of multifamily rental housing with over 35,000 apartment units across Canada. Boardwalk has strong ties to the communities it works in and is committed to building quality, sustainable, and environmentally responsible projects. The main project goals for this application are to provide safe, quality, attainable rental housing, provide higher density than single-family townhome or townhome type to add greater housing stock to the City of Regina, to build with high-quality, durable materials and environmentally sensitivity, to respect single-family properties to the southeast by transitioning its massing with step-down building and greater setback distance, and to respect the adjacent community. Also, it would be to employ crime prevention features such as patios at grade, maximize visibility, walkways, and state-of-the-art surveillance systems, and of course to provide barrier-free accessible living opportunities. This project is consistent with Regina's housing incentive policy, where it makes efficient use of existing city infrastructure and amenities while helping to build a vibrant, inclusive neighborhood. It also supports modest, attainable, accessible housing options and improves the rental housing supply. Although things are improving, it is well understood that the current shortage of available rental housing in Regina is putting significant pressure on the city's ability to deal with its current growth rate. Rental housing needs to be distributed as equally as possible throughout the different communities so that the responsibility of providing rental housing is not shouldered by only a select few communities, but rather the entire city. In addition to rental housing, the importance of density must be emphasized. Again, consisting mostly of single-family homes and some townhomes. Prairie View is able to contribute more to the density of Regina. Providing this level of density along First Avenue makes good sense, good planning sense. As a result of the public open house that was held back in May of this year, we received feedback from the community concerning the proposed scale and height of the development and the proximity to the single-family homes to the south of the site. The site is zoned for R6, and as such, allows for density FAR of 3 times the site area. The proposed density is actually less than half of the allowable at 1.16. The allowable height in an R6 zone is 20 meters, which is approximately equivalent to about 7 stories. The proposed building heights are predominantly 4 stories, or under 11 meters in height. Traffic impact that this development would have was also a concern for the community. During the discretionary approval process for this application, the Regina Transportation Department reviewed the anticipated traffic along First Avenue and determined that the amount of traffic would be sufficiently low enough to not warrant a full traffic impact assessment, or TIA, for First Avenue. All that was required instead was a review of the existing traffic generated by the townhomes to the east of the subject parcel and the estimated volume of traffic to be generated by the new proposed development. The parking provided exceeds the minimum bylaw required amount to ensure minimum off-site parking impact on adjacent roads. Conforming with new provincial standards, the proposed development will provide 19 new barrier-free units and elevators in all buildings that will provide much-needed accessible housing opportunities to mobility-challenged residents. As mentioned earlier, this development will help expand the range of housing alternatives for Regina. Also, within the buildings themselves, there will be a variety of suite types available that will provide greater choices depending on family size or lifestyle. To conclude, Boardwalk Rental Communities is a reputable company that has a proven track record of successfully operating and maintaining quality, safe rental properties for its residents. They are excited about the opportunity of providing housing that is consistent with the vision of Regina's planning to increase housing density and rental opportunities within established areas while respecting and contributing positively to the immediate surrounding community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Casola, for your presentation. Questions? Councillor Donald.
Thanks, evening, Mr. Casola. Just a couple of things. One is there's property adjacent to this blank land that is owned by Boardwalk. Can you explain how the two would blend in together? Is there, in terms of traffic, amenities, those types of things?
Sure, thank you. The existing site does play an important role. It is part of the development, or will be part of the development once it's complete. The townhouse site actually is another access point to the new site. So instead of just off of First Avenue, we do have traffic that will flow off onto Dorothy. So that'll actually lessen the impact on First Avenue. So that's one thing. The other is we've tried to incorporate as much of the pedestrian path network to the existing site so that they can all share in the new amenities that will be built within the new site, such as the seating areas and the playgrounds that are also added to this landscape.
Sure, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Can I get you to elaborate in terms of the type of suite arrangement that might be there? Is there bachelor, 1 bedroom, 2, that type of thing?
Yes, it ranges mostly from a 1 bedroom to 2 bedroom plus den. So that's kind of the range. We don't have anything that's small as a studio type.
And I understand that you are required to have barrier-free, but I'm also curious as to demand for barrier-free. So is this a number that works? From your experience and Boardwalk's experience, is this the niche?
Yes, in fact, that is a 5% number. That represents 5% of the total units. And it is a trend towards that. Even market condos that we've seen, even in Alberta, that we're providing more and more accessible units, even within the regular market, as opposed to the rental.
Okay, thanks. One other question. This is new for Boardwalk. I'm not familiar with Boardwalk, but this is new for Boardwalk to build. Could you just comment on that and perhaps why they're building?
It is relatively new for Boardwalk. Mostly they have been attaining existing housing stock and then investing in it and making it available for the communities. But they have completed recently one in Calgary. It's a 109-unit, very similar model of wood frame construction, and it's successfully full right now. So dealing with the same thing in Calgary.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Councillor Fraser?
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Yeah, thanks for your presentation. So certainly one of the legacies of this this time right now is going to be multi-unit housing in Regina. We have, even tonight, there's about 560 units that are before us. Given that Boardwalk has many different types of multi-unit housing around Regina, and that this is a new, a new piece that you're going to be designing and building, how does this? What have we learned from past examples of multi-unit as far as what works and what doesn't work, and what have you incorporated into this to make it? From the perspective of someone living there, how's the lived experience going to be in this versus some of the other units in the city?
Are you referring to just the apartment type housing, or?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. It's important to note that, as I mentioned in my presentation, that Boardwalk doesn't just build or own properties. They take an active role and a responsibility within the communities that they're in. So it's not just about the building technically, but it's also about the community that they try to work with. So I think I mentioned in the Regina Planning Commission that they do put together meetings, excuse me, and try to instigate more interactive community-type events within this development. Will be about 364 units. So they're going to try to create venues for them for the residents to meet and know each other. As far as the model of density, it's the best way to get the most density. It's still a walk-up type building, and as far as scale, it certainly fits within communities such as Prairie View. It doesn't impose on them much like high-rise buildings would.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Other questions of the delegation? Councillor Fundura?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you. For, just a quick question on the barrier-free. My question would be on the construction of a suite, an apartment, comparison to when you're constructing just a regular. That means then in comparison to the price on the rental to a regular suite to a completely barrier-free one. How does that compare for someone to come and rent a unit like that? And how does the suite looks like? Is it totally washroom accessible, kitchen setup, all of that, living space, living room, bedrooms? So then when you rent, if there's a higher cost for say providing that particular suite, how do you manage that? Through Your Worship?
Sure, through Your Worship. I think to answer your first part of your question, I don't believe that there would be an increased or an incremental increase of cost for that unit necessarily. I think it's mostly based on the area of the unit as opposed to how it's designed. But for the second part of the question, which would be what the unit actually looks like, I mean, when it's barrier-free, that meets the requirements of all the building code. It has a specific section that deals with barrier-free, and it has requirements that deal with all of the rooms, that be the washrooms, the kitchen, the bedrooms, and all the clearances that would be required.
Okay, and then I'm just looking at the site, to Your Worship, parking, designated parking for individuals with disability, with a wheelchair or scooter or something like that. Comparison to where you're situating the suites, are you looking at having parking close to, and then how do you, well, it's a bigger question. How do you police certain things like that for parking?
Mm-hmm. It's much similar to any parking lot that you would visit. So obviously we try to make sure there's logic to the location of the handicap stalls. And typically they're closer to the front entrance of the building. And in this case, it's a rental, so none of the stalls will be titled. So they'll always be available to whoever needs them. And they are distributed throughout the site so that each building will have its own share of that stock of accessible parking stalls.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Verdera. Other questions? You can return to the gallery and we'll not consider the report before us. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you. 13154, an application for discretionary use, proposed plan group of low-rise apartments, 1060 Dorothy Street. Worship, there's going to be two parts to my presentation. One will be this, and the other will be personal comments. What you have before you is an existing zoning of R6. I point that out because this land has been vacant and zoned R6 for decades, actually. So beside it are an existing 130, I think, 130 or 31 unit townhouse development, and there's always been a field right beside it, designated R6. What's proposed is 364 units of rental, 557 stalls, some of them underground and so on, and other sorts of amenities. You will note from the presentation that Boardwalk, or the proponent in this case, said they look at adding density to all areas of the city. Now I'll lead into my other comments. This is out my back door. This is when I go out in my backyard, I'm going to see this area. I want you to know that the 131 units have been my neighbor for about 32 years. In the 32 years, I've never had a problem with the 131 neighbors, nor have any of my neighbors. And so when I became councillor and this area was within my ward, I never once had a problem with any of the 131 neighbors. And in fact, talked to many of them. Why do I point this out? Because we have had delegations before us that are opposed to rental. I'm going to tell you that I am in favor of this, that this is the type of density in this area that makes sense. And the reason it makes sense is because we have transit to the area. We have 4 schools in the area. First Avenue North was referenced. It is a wider street and can take more traffic. Dorothy Street leads on to Sherwood, Sherwood on to Courtney, Courtney on to 9th Avenue North, and hopefully over to Pinkey for a real quick trip around Regina. We have a strip mall in the area that services very well, and you are within walking distance of a major mall with a major grocery store and movie theaters and so on. This is a wonderful location. I believe it's well planned out. I wish to have this in my neighborhood. I wish my neighbors, by the way, who I've talked to, all wish to have this in the neighborhood. We'd like to welcome them in. Look for concurrence, please.
Well, I thought you were going to say that you didn't want it in your backyard, Councillor O'Donnell. That's good to hear. Any comments on the report? Getting 364 units is really good. Councillor Fraser.
Thanks. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Question for administration. Sorry, I probably should have asked this of the developer, but do we know if this is going to take advantage of our rental incentive? Any of these
Mr. Carlston?
Thanks.
Your Worship, I believe it will be within the tax incentive
Okay, thanks.
component.
But sorry, the tax incentive, but not necessarily the 15,000 per door for market rentals.
Mr. Carlston?
Yes, Your Worship, I believe it's just the tax incentive that they'll be accessing.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for that. Other questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. City Manager's report, administration reports, Grey Cup. You have a mover for that? Councillor Flagel, you want to move the report?
I can do that. And basically, this is the CM 13-13 101st Grey Cup Festival, starting on the 20th to the 24th of 2013. And, of course, the game is on the 24th. I think 5 p.m. is the start.
That's a commercial, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so, for whoever it is, CBC, TSN, all those guys. So the conclusion is the City of Regina administration, through a council report dated March 6, 2013, received approval to allocate $865,100 from the General Reserve to activities involved with hosting the 101st Grey Cup Festival and Grey Cup Championship game. The report also provides authority to the city manager to negotiate with the Saskatchewan Roughrider Football Club the recovery of all or a portion of the total unfunded cost of the $865,100 associated with this event, and to execute an agreement on the cost recovery portion.
I'll need a seconder for that, please.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor. Go ahead.
I'm good, and we'll leave it at that.
Okay.
That's the main thrust of it, and there's about another page and a half, but we'll leave it at that.
Okay. Other comments? This actually Dick tells us how much we will be recovering, about $325,000 from that negotiated contract. Other comments on this? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Executive Committee reports, CR 13-155. Councillor Flagel.
CR 13-155 is ratifying the collective agreement with the Canadian Union of Public Employees, Local 21. The recommendation is that the agreement reached with the Canadian Union of Public Employees, Regina Outside City Workers, Local 21, be approved. An agreement has been reached with the Canadian Union of Public Employees, Regina Outside Workers, Local 21. The details of the agreement are outlined in this report and include a wage settlement of 3 years, inclusive of some enhancements to casual staff, including wages and benefit increases, and the payment of first-day sick leave to those casual staff with greater than 4,160 hours of seniority. In exchange for the wage settlement and enhancements, as mentioned, the city will no longer provide a payout of sick leave for permanent employees hired after January 1st, 2014, who have accumulated more than 10 years of service prior to leaving the employment of the city. In addition, the total allowable vacation accumulation has been reduced to the employee's current annual entitlement plus 2 weeks from the current 3 times the annual entitlement. And again, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you for that. Just to be clear, it's for 2013 is 2.5%, 2014 is 2.25%, 2015 is 3% on the settlement. Comments or questions on the report? This is good news. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Report 56.
I'll declare conflict.
Conflict so declared. We'll just wait a moment, please. Councillor Flagel.
This is regarding CR 13-156, 2014 North American Indigenous Games, that the Deputy City Manager, Community Planning and Development be delegated to the authority to negotiate and approve the terms of the conditions agreement between the City of Regina and the Regina 2014 North American Indigenous Games, Inc., as outlined in this report. That also, the Deputy City Manager, Community Planning and Development be delegated the authority to negotiate and approve the terms of the venue agreement between the City of Regina and the Regina 2014 North American Indigenous Games as outlined, and that the City Clerk be authorized to execute the contribution agreement and venue agreement on behalf of the City. And again, there's a whole bunch of details that go into this. There's cash that goes along with this. There's also venues in lieu of for the games that will commence in 2014. And this is a really good news for the City of Regina. We looked at the bid committee back in 06 or 07, I think was when we twirled these guys around Tor Hill Golf Course, and we did a whole bunch of things. And we were unsuccessful at that time, but we regrouped, and the Indigenous Games Committee regrouped, and ag group, and it's been successful to this date. And they're looking for volunteers, and that's my commercial.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Comments on the report? Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm going to encourage everyone to support this, and one of the things that I had the privilege of doing is being on the bid for this, and this is in fact what we promised. That is that upwards of $1 million, both through cash and in-kind service, would be provided. That is what is in the report, and that is in fact what we had promised for the games. So I'd like us to be able to hold our promise. The second part I want to point out is, and just a reminder, we had Glenn Pratt to us at the Executive Committee. And although Glenn said many, many positive things, I think the thing that put it all in perspective, although we expect to have 7,000 kids here to compete and have cultural events and so on, which is a wonderful number, each one of them bring 5 other people. And so the number of people that will be coming into our community in July of 2014 is both significant but also impactful for us to welcome them and look after them, but for us to learn the culture from all over the U.S., all over Canada. This is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. Look forward to it.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other comments or questions? Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, it's been amazing to sort of try to understand the real scope of this, both just the number of people here and also the fact that this is only a 1-week game, whereas a lot of times, when we had the Canada Games here, it was a big event, but it spread over 2 weeks. So this is really, I think it's fair to say this might be the biggest event that Regina has ever hosted in some respect. I think I look forward to supporting this motion. I think it's money very well spent. I'm just wondering if there's a comment from administration. Is there anything else that the city or we as council need to be doing to help ensure that this event is the success that it can be?
Mr. Carlston.
Your Worship, our Mr. Holden is the representative on the committee, so I'd ask Mr. Holden to maybe provide some comment on that.
Mr. Holden.
Through you, Your Worship, I think Councillor O'Donnell has put it quite eloquently in terms of, this is a fantastic opportunity in our community, not only from a multi-sport event, but also from a cultural event. And you're also correct in terms of this will be one of the largest multi-sport events that we've ever had in our community. How can council continue to support? I mean, I think the fact that we're here tonight, we've made a commitment to the games. We're coming through in terms of the financial commitments and the services. So I think there'll be a lot of opportunity throughout the lead up to the games and the games themselves for City Council to show the support, welcome visitors and athletes to Regina. So it will be in a very exciting July in 2014.
Okay, thank you. Is it possible, will we be receiving more updates between then and now?
Mr. Holden?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, yes, we can work with the NAG Host Society and actually have Glenn Pratt, the CEO, come and provide an update, whether that's every 3 months from now until the games. We'd be willing to bring an information report forward.
Sure, I trust whatever you think is appropriate, but I think it would be useful for us to have some feedback potentially between then and now. So thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Councillor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship, and I too am happy to support. I think this is a fantastic opportunity for Regina to showcase, and albeit our good fortune that we have the opportunity to kind of showcase a little bit of another event. We just talked about the 101st Grey Cup. Now, my understanding is that this is kind of a primer event. This isn't going to be quite the same size as the NAG Games. Obviously, there's a lot more going on. This is a much bigger event, but for those of us that think the Grey Cup's a big deal, hold on to your hats, because this is going to be a huge deal come July. So it's fantastic, and it's a great opportunity for us to showcase just how good we can do it with the Grey Cup, and we'll ramp it up and make sure that we can cover all the bases in the upcoming events in July. So looking forward to the NAG Games. I think it's going to be fantastic. So thanks, Your Worship. Happy to support.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Other comments? I'll ask Councillor Flay to take the chair just for a moment, very briefly.
Mayor Fraser.
Thank you. Just Councillor Fraser asked for a comment. What else can we do? I just want to point out that Mr. Holden and his staff have done a very good job of representing the city on the NAG Games board. I just want to point out he's done a great job and represented us very well. What we have before us, of course, is not the money allocation. We've already agreed to do that. These are the contribution agreements to transfer the monies, of course, and then the venue agreement. And this was asked at executive, but I'll ask it again to Mr. Holden, if I might just, through you, Mr. Chair, to explain the venues that we are agreeing to give access to those at the games, because they're quite significant.
Mr. Holden.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. There are 15 events that are a part of the NAG Games, and the city will be hosting the majority of those events. So they will be using the Lawson Aquatic Center for swimming. We'll be using various facilities at Rambler Park and Mount Pleasant for soccer and baseball. We'll be using the Douglas Park Canada Games athletic facility in terms of track and field. So once again, the city's very excited to be hosting, the majority of events. The events that are happening away from city facilities are shooting, archery, canoe kayak. There are a few of the high schools being used to support basketball and volleyball, but all the other events are in city facilities, and we're excited to host.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chair. Just last comment. We know this is bigger than the Grey Cup. No question about the number of people coming here. Report refers to, I believe, about $34 million on economic impact for the games. For the Grey Cup, it's about $23 million. So just on that alone. But the number that's been given, certainly talked about at the Executive Committee, was for the last NAG Games, and doesn't talk about increasing cost inflation and transportation size and what actually is spent. So the economic impact is significant. It likely will be the biggest games we've ever had here. Thank you. Other comments on the report? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Flagel.
Thank you. I rise for CR 13-157, redevelopment of former service station brownfield sites. This is recommended by Executive Committee that items M3 13-3 be removed from the list of outstanding items for the Executive Committee. that the administration provide a report within a year on how the brownfield sites can be included into the intensification strategy under the OCP, including best practices research. The committee adopt a resolution to concur in the recommendations contained in the report after adding a recommendation number 2 to read as follows, that the administration provide a report within 1 year. The other thing on nationally, the scope of vacant former service stations is as follows. Federation of Canadian Municipalities notes that service stations are the most common brownfield sites in Canada. The National Roundtable of the Environment and Economy estimates there's 30,000 brownfield sites in Canada. There's currently 15 vacant properties in Regina that are known to the administration to be former service stations. The maps and addresses, the inventories of the vacant lots. So therefore, we're looking for a report to come forward in about a year from administration.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Councillor Donald.
Thanks. So I brought this motion forward a long time ago, and we discussed it at Executive Committee. What followed after Executive Committee was that we got a little publicity about this. And I'm going to specifically tell you that one of the places I ended up was with Sheila Coles at 7:15 in the morning. It wasn't my best time. I want you to know the hair wasn't combed, but anyway, I was there. And obviously we had an engaging conversation because she asked good questions. By the time I got home, I had 2 texts and a phone message. And so people had listened. And what was interesting is that, and this is the part I want to relay, is that I had a long conversation with the gentleman. I'm going to leave the location unmentioned, but he's been trying very hard to get a hold of one of these pieces of property to do a land assembly that would result in a commercial and a housing development in a place where we don't have housing development right now. And he just simply said, can you help me? After that, I got another phone call from a fellow who said, I have my eye on that site, and we've been asking questions. Can you just help a little bit, because we want that site? So my goal was 1 a year, and now all of a sudden there's 2 out there that people are actually showing interest. The third part was also interesting. I met with a company who has done work in Alberta, is currently going to do work in Manitoba, and wants to do work in Regina and remediate sites. And they have a process that would be new to our area that is based on clay. And of course, that is our soil. And he said, we're even thinking about doing a demonstration site. Can you help us get connected? So I'm a little pumped about this. I know nothing of geotechnical. I know nothing of engineering and so on. But it's funny when people see a good thing that they'll step up. So hopefully we can talk nice about this another time.
Thank you, Councillor Donald. Other questions or comments on the report? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 2 reports from Planning Commission, then we're finished for the night. Councillor Donald.
13157, application for discretionary use, proposed plan group of apartment dwellings. Chuka Boulevard, Green Apple Drive, the Greens on Gardner. So we talked about apartments, a whole pile of them out in my neighborhood, which is to the west, and now we're talking to the east. You'll note that it's also zoned R6, so this is consistent, 143 dwelling units, 229 stalls, and so in the very far reaches of the east end of the city, we now have apartment buildings available to us. We think this is a good thing. Look for concurrence.
Comments, questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Donald.
Thanks again. 13158, a discretionary use application, proposed plan group of townhouses, Narcisse Drive, Huckstone Subdivision. R5, consistent again with what was there, 62 dwelling units, 129 stalls. This is an area of high densification, and this happens to be a medium one. And so we have lots of activity out there. The apartment rentals in this area are starting to be rented. So you've been approving these for a while, but there's actually people living out there side by each with the single homes that are there. Again, we see this as beneficial.
Any comments or questions on this report? Councillor Fraser.
Thanks. Yeah, just a quick note that, with these developments, actually tonight we'll be approving 569 new units. So that's just really exciting news. I don't know. The rental situation here has been, again, the lowest rental vacancy rate in Canada for 5 years until the spring. And in a city our size, this is actually a very significant amount. It's not to say all these units will be rentals, but it's some good news. So looking forward to that.
Thanks for that, Councillor Fraser. I have a question to the administration. I believe it was last council meeting. I asked the question of how many units we thought we had of rental units, and at that time the number was about 1,000. I'm wondering if the administration can update us on how many we have had over the calendar year so far. Any idea? Mr. Carlson, just putting you on the spot, unfortunately.
Yes, Your Worship, I'll be putting Mr. Searle on the spot, but just to pick up where Councillor Fraser left off, of these 560 units, 500 are rentals. And just to put it into context, Councillor Flegel asked at Planning Commission in terms of vacancy rate, there's about 12,000 rental units in the city that count towards the vacancy rate. So 1% is 120, so you can see this is a several percentage point contribution towards the vacancy rate. But to your question, I might ask Mr. Searle, see if he has a precise number.
Yes, Your Worship. Currently, our staff is putting together details on the projects over the last calendar year that have been approved and that are currently in the construction phase, and those units that are being occupied. Our intent is to provide those details to members of council through a memorandum in the very near future.
That's good. Thank you very much. And another,
Your point, that's all I was going to say.
No, go ahead.
On your point, we talked about district planning as well, and so we would like to have this as a
Yes.
regular part of our reports.
It's good. I have a question related to CMHC report, related to when they speak of vacancy rates. We should be having another report coming out, I believe, relatively soon. The last one was this spring, I believe. Mr. Carlson, do you have any notion of that?
Your Worship, you are correct. It's a spring and late fall, so I'm not sure if it's been published yet, but we'll follow up and we'll see what the vacancy rate is as a result in our most current survey.
And CMHC officials would be in contact with you and your officials, Mr. Carlson, about the amount of construction, what's coming on stream, what's actually available on the market? Mr. Carlson?
Your Worship, we will be in contact with CMHC on that, and just to note that National Housing Day will be coming up again on November 15th.
Right. Thank you for that. Other questions on this report? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Motion to adjourn?
Adjournment.
Seconder, please.
I'll second that.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening.